jahai so tu hai tujhse humne dil ko lagaya jo kuch hai so tu hai tujhse humne dil ko lagaya ek tujhko apan apaya ek tujhko apan apaya jo kuch hai so tu Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadja Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman, time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karva Vahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvesho Vahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. You have either walked in or you have tuned in today to the class on Vedanta that we are about to give, which is the fourth in a series that we're calling Gaudapada's Non-Touch Yoga. The new issue of our Nectar Journal is about to come out. It's a once-a-year affair. And in there we have some wonderful articles about the non-dual reality. And one of them is about Gaudapada's non-touch yoga by our own founder, Lex Hickson, who gave classes on that subject in New York quite often, a whole series of them. So this non-touch yoga is rather an interesting term. In Sanskrit, it's Asparga yoga. Asparsha yoga, sorry. I'm thinking of asparagus I had yesterday, maybe. Asparsha yoga. And this morning at satsang we were calling it non-touch, and one of the questions came up, why do you call it non-touch, or why did he call it non-touch? I said, well, it could be non-smell, non-seeing, non-hearing, non-feeling. Any of those would apply to it because basically it's just beyond the senses. It's a state of enlightenment that's always at hand, as Shankara says, because Gaudapada was his guru's guru. So it's transcended the senses, but it also conveys the idea that it is a very unique, singular type of pathway, the pathway. Advaita Yoga we were looking at in the first class was mentioned, and that could very well represent it. And it's that state of mind in which all other yogas are contained, that is, it's superlative in that it knows the one main axiom of non-duality, which is basically non-origination is the word we use, or non-production, that there's no beginning to anything. It's just all one stream of consciousness, and it never ends. It just seems to end. It especially seems to end when consciousness gets limited to a body-mind mechanism, and when time gets limited to day and night, and when space gets limited to a physical world alone. When there are other worlds or kingdoms of heaven within you, then beings start thinking in terms of separation and periods of time and levels of space and different worlds. All of that comes into being, and all of a sudden then originations seems to be the truth. Origins, you know where I'm going with that. The idea that Christendom built its main temple of teaching on that idea of origins. And origins is a good teaching, no doubt. It's just not the ultimate truth. It won't satisfy the human being who knows somewhere inside of it that they're formless essence, that they were undying. And if they're undying, it means they were never really born. Being born is just a matter of assuming a form. It's never a matter of identifying with the form, just associating with it and giving it up. In fact, you do that again every day and every night when you go to sleep and wake up. You're associating with different forms. Even in the daytime, if you're daydreaming, you might be thinking of yourself as a different form somewhere. So the eye cannot see itself. The idea, it's always looking out. Senses are always outward going, and so they're defective in that way. They need to be turned inside and made single, so forth. Single ear, single eye, single voice, or a single sound, like Om. That's origins. But beyond origins is this non-dual reality, which is essence. We were talking about it this morning as Swarupa Jnana, the meditation on one's essence. And in the accompanying meditation was called Taila Dara Jnana. That is the pouring of oil from one beaker to another in a perfect stream without any splashing or spilling. That's the way this container has to be with that infinite container called Brahman. It has to meditate in such a way that it's putting its full attention on that. So I said the best key for that, probably the best meditation, is to borrow from form. You're trying to reach a formless state by pouring yourself into the non-dual Brahman, into the Almighty Father, into Buddha nature. So you need a little help there. Then here's one: concentrate on a waterfall. Imagine that you are sitting and camping around a waterfall for 24 hours. So day and night you're there. And the thing is continually pounding there in the background. I was at the source of the Ganges a couple times, and outside the little guest house there in Gangotri, which is just several kilometers from Cow's Mouth, Gaumukh, where the source of the Ganges comes out of the mountains. There's a little guest house there, and outside there's a huge waterfall that just pounds all night. So you sleep in this guest house, and besides the ozone effect and all of that, aerated air and all the water, you have this thundering sound all night that you fall asleep to and wake up to. So that's the idea of this pouring yourself like a waterfall does into the next valley or into the next pool. It's constantly thundering like that, and you can stay there not only 24 hours but days or weeks or months, and it still keeps going. It never ends. So that's a good metaphor for Tailadara Jnana. Just take up that idea of constancy, of pouring your attention into one thing, as dedicated as the waterfall is to the river, and to the banks, to the pools. Now, on the other hand of that, you have this Swarupa Jnana, and it's meditating on your essence. So you're not going anywhere. You're not flowing like a waterfall or making any sound. That's more like the non-touch yoga, non-sound yoga, non-sight yoga. See, it's unseen. So for that, you're going to meditate on an ocean rather than a waterfall. An ocean is just there, and it just sits there. If you live in Hawaii, you might have noticed that. And if you live in this ashram, you can see it every day, how it just sits there. My, that's an awful lot of water out there. See? And it's usually very still. A few whitecaps occasionally, but there it is, huge mass of water. So meditate upon your consciousness as an ocean like that. And that would be a Swarupa Dhyan. Immediately and deeply, that is the minute you sit, you are that ocean of awareness, and see what happens inside of such a meditation like that. So these are ideas that came up this morning in our satsang around this great tenet of non-duality, and its accompanying tenet called non-origination. Ajativada would be the Sanskrit word. Ajati means no species, no birth. And like Shankara, as we often sing, Nam Mrityor Nashanka Nami Jati Beda, I have no death, Mrityor. I have no jati, ajati is I have no birth. And I have no pita or no mata, no father or no mother. I don't even have a birth at all. So this is how he's meditating in his non-dual awareness. And that's why I started off saying, Om Drishyam Pratitam Pravilapayansan. Drishyam means drishya, to see. You're the seer of that consciousness. It's an exciting thing, you see. It's the adventure of consciousness. You've had adventures in space, and you've had adventures underwater. I've had adventures across the 7 continents and so forth. Now have an adventure of consciousness you see inside of yourself. And go into your meditation with that kind of enthusiasm. Utsaha, Sanskrit. Utsaha, with that kind of enthusiasm, with a great anticipation. Not necessarily an expectation, but an anticipation is good, they say. Expectation, those can get dashed, as you know. But anticipation is sort of just on the verge all the time, on the edge. You're waiting for that thing to happen. If it doesn't happen, you're willing to keep on waiting. See? So it creates this kind of underlying atmosphere of anticipation that you might see God at any second. See? Of course, funny thing is that we're seeing God everywhere at all times. We're seeing God with form. And the thing about non-touch yoga is that we don't usually get a glimpse of the unseen God. You see, it was John that said, no one hath ever seen God at any time. So when you see Jesus, even John or someone like that would mention, well, this is God in form, but he has an almighty Father, you see. And he's experienced that, called samadhi or nirvana or satori, or maybe in Christianity you could say beatific vision, if it were of the non-dual type. So there is this unseen that fascinates us, that inspires us, that all beings, when they tire of play, sport in the worlds of name and form, will have that desire to, as Gandhi said, see face to face. See that Lord face to face. Of course, there would be no faces there, because that would be a form, but by way of expression. And that is really what's behind your desire to sleep. Deep sleep is formless, isn't it? So you really want to go there because that's the only time that even the ordinary Joe, the ordinary man, will actually feel the presence of formless reality in deep sleep. We all do. We just don't remember what we experienced there when we wake up. And we pass through dream on the way, and that also modifies our consciousness. So we're used to the 2 levels of form, waking and dreaming. I'm putting this in Gaudapada's way of saying. But deep sleep, we don't really know that. As my teacher used to say, a fool goes into deep sleep and comes out a fool. But an awakened soul would go in a fool and he would come out a seer. See, if he had his third eye open when he experienced deep sleep, what it really correlates to is what's called unmanifested prakriti. That is where all form has been taken into abeyance, a pool of potential. That's the word, Om. All form comes out of the word. In the beginning was the word, right? So if you were to see the word, you'd be seeing the penultimate reality. In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God. You'd be seeing the word that is with God. And then once you passed beyond the word into absolute formlessness, then the word was God. Then it's one thing. that would epitomize the non-touch yoga. You've passed beyond touching anything with the eyes, or hearing anything with the ears, like Om, or the form of the Lord, Jesus or Buddha walking around on earth. So with this little preamble, I can sort of warm you up to the fourth class in today's in this series of classes called Gaudapada's Non-Touch Yoga, Asparsha. And last week we took several charts, which we're always doing, to help us, these visual aids, if you will, that the live streaming audience can see too up close, and we can also see them at a distance like we hear, but I'll explain them each. I thought the tack we would take to start off the fourth class was this idea that I mentioned this morning about proof. Everyone's always looking for proof, right? The Sanskrit word for that is pramana. So what is the proof that you have a soul? The soul is purusha in old Sanskrit speak. Purusha was the word they used. If you divide it up, purusha, it somehow defines somehow as, or translates somehow as the indweller in the city of 9 gates. If you count the openings, apertures in your body, you'll see with the senses and everything, some of them active and some of them cognitive. There are 9 gates, basically. So there's an indweller inside of that city of 9 gates. Just think of the implications of the term Purusha. That somebody came along and said, that means indweller inside the city with 9 gates. So it means that none of these gates are you. And the city is not you either, but the indweller is you. So that separates you right away in one fell swoop, with one word, from everything that takes form. You're automatically untouched. See? You're pure and perfect. Isn't that what they tell you when they speak about the Atman? So, hell with meditating on a waterfall or an ocean. That might take time, you see. Let's just jump to the chase. You see, let's just say, I am the Purusha, or I am Atma Brahma. This self is Brahman. I am that. There are people with that kind of verve, spiritual audacity, to make such a statement. I and my Father are one was one of the greatest statements on recent record. 2,000 years in India is nothing. You go back 8 or 10,000 earlier than that, and you'll find the ancient Vedic rishis and some of the tantrasists along the Indus River and so forth, in very deep worship and having samadhi and bhavas and writing down and teaching their children these great truths for posterity that would last for thousands of years after them, coming down to us in a very pure form, like we're sitting here today. Has really any time passed in that 12,000 year sweep? We're back 12,000 years ago sitting just like this talking about these same things. See? And if you forgot about them, then you fought to get your way back, because you wanted to hear about those things. As hard to hear as they are sometimes, and as outright boring as they can be, if you're not in a sattvic mood. But that's part of the point. If you expose yourself to truth, you find out where your mind is at that particular moment when you hear it. If it's in a very balanced state, you get inspired. And you're inspired that day by a scripture, by a mantra, by a teaching from a guru. But the very next day you could read that same scripture and hear that same teaching and read that same book, and you just be bored to tears with it. You see? So part of this is showing up our mind as what it is, the mind-ego complex. The root of that would be called the antakarana. It's the inner cause of everything. So that's one of the penultimate truths too, is that you realize that when Gaudapada talks about non-origination or ajativada, what he's really saying is there's no such thing as production. You cannot produce a thing. It remains unproduced. If you say, I have produced a thing, then where was it before it was produced? You see, I mean, that's what he says in his slokas. It's ingenious. Even Western sciences looked at his karaka and said, I've never heard a philosophy like this. This person is somewhere else. See, so Gaudapada's karaka is just like for Eastern and Western philosopher alike, it's like throw up your hands and go, wow, I've been wanting to hear something like that. It leaves us in a very strange predicament when you hear a teaching like that, because everything you've thought about a creator, or about whether you're a theologian thinking about seven-day creation theory or any kind of creation theory, or if you're a scientist or a materialist and you're thinking about evolution, it all of a sudden turns it on its ear. See? It gives you this unique piece of knowledge, non-touch yoga, that all of a sudden puts you in charge of everything, or proves to you that you are in charge of everything, that the Purusha is superior to Prakriti. Superior to Prakriti in its manifested form out here, and superior to Prakriti in its unmanifested form inside, which is why I just chanted Sanmatram Bahir Antaram Va. Take those two things, external and internal, and render them into one state. Then meditate on that state, pass your time contentedly, and be free. See? This is what they've done. Those who have accomplished successful spiritual life, that's what they've done. They've taken, what to speak of, fragments, of distortions, of sublations, of conditionings, of modifications, of false superimpositions, of diversities, of multitudes. What to speak of all those things, they've finally taken the two basic things, the internal and the external, and they've merged them. And now they're sitting around in a state of non-touch yoga. You can't touch them, and they don't want to touch it. Krishna puts it very nicely in the Bhagavad Gita, and Lord Kapila puts it very nicely in the Samkhya Yoga too. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's that one whom the world cannot afflict, and who does not afflict the world, that one is fit for the Brahman state. So you do not afflict the world, and the world cannot afflict you. And that's the non-touch yogi right there, completely in a non-dual state. There is no such thing as you and the world. There's just the great self. There is no such thing as God and devil. There's just the great self. There is no such thing as internal and external. That's all an appearance. You cannot fool me anymore. You cannot pull the wool over my eyes anymore. I'm in Asparsha Yoga. So, at first it puts us in a very strange conundrum when you hear this kind of thing. We're immediately questioning and probably at odds with the seven-day creation theory and the 4,320,000,000 year evolutionary theory. And we think, what about everything just here and now? See, why am I constantly projecting myself into the future and brooding on the past when everything right here in this eternal moment is all that I am? And you cannot change that. You cannot touch it, and you cannot change it. The soul is not made perfect over time. It was perfect before time. In fact, time came out of it. Space came out of it. Causation came out of it. Unfortunately, karma it's called. Everything came out of that one indivisible self as a modification or a manifestation of its own powers. That's the beauty of knowing Shakti, Brahman and Shakti. That's the kind of Vedantic, Tantric, commingled ideal, you see, is that Brahman is the indivisible, static reality, but it has this side to it called Shakti. It's like fire in its burning power, as they say, you see, or water in its wetness. The two who are one. When great couples come along, that's what you're seeing, really, a manifestation of Brahman and Shakti, or the highest wisdom and the deepest love, Brahmagyana and Prema Bhakti. So this is all about results. You see, at least as far as looking at it from the standpoint of progression, or from the standpoint of growth, or from the standpoint of positive transformation. It's all about that. Now, back to the Samkhya chart that we can show here now. Kapila, who is very early on, is ready to stand up and tell you we have come to the conclusion that there are 6 definitive proofs that you have a soul. Words can't really prove it to you, but if you want to go into words, since you're arguing with me, I mean, they tried arguing with Gaudapada and his Karka, and he said, we have no argument with the dualists. We have no argument with the fundamentalists. We have no argument with the qualified non-dualists. We just declare that Advaita, non-duality, is supreme, because it's the only one that stands up and says there is no such thing as a creator, there's no such thing as production, there's no such thing as transformation. Everything is pure and perfect all the time. It is whole and absolute. You cannot add anything to Brahman, and you cannot take anything away from Brahman. Doesn't that sound like you can't touch it? Because in order to take something away from it, wouldn't you have to stick out a hand and try and grab something? But you stick out a hand to grab Brahman, where is Brahman? The hand that's sticking it out is Brahman. You see? The idea to stick your hand out was Brahman too. See? That was its Shakti power, the movement. See? So that is the purity and perfection of divine reality. He just declares it straight out. And there's no argument against it. So even earlier than Gaudapada, much earlier, because Gaudapada was maybe 500-600 AD, Shankara, his student, maybe 700 AD. So with Kapila, even far back there, they had these 6 very beautiful indications or proofs of the Purusha. Let's look at them real quick, because it very much plays into India's development. And it also shows that this non-duality, which Gaudapada was to call a Sparsha Yoga, was there in the very beginning of India's philosophies. It was not something also that gets produced or grows or evolves. It was there as a declaration from the greatest seers thousands and thousands of years before Gaudapada even walked the earth in that particular form, long before Jesus came and declared the unity of the human soul with the divine being. There was this, like Krishna had put it, thread running through all the pearls that nobody could see, that hooked them all together. And some of these you'll see are very beautiful in that way. Underlying substratum, for instance. There it is, cohesive substratum. I didn't mean to start on number 4, but let's look at that, because that's where the dialogue has taken me. And the idea is that our various experiences occur simultaneously, which indicates a subtle coordinator. Why is it that you remember who you are when you wake up? You were lots of other beings in your dreams, and you were nobody in deep sleep. Why when you woke up, did you remember that you're Joe or Bob or Susan, you see? And you remember all your experiences and so forth. You even remember some of your dreams. Because there's a coordinator to all these events, to all these activities, to all these thoughts. That's called cohesive substratum. Like a dancer needing a stage. That's there for all beings. And we also remember who each other are. Most of the time, unless your memory isn't very good. What's your name again? See, you have that problem. Or when the physical organ gets a little old, you have that Alzheimer problem, you see. But this idea of kutastanitya, it's called, cohesive substratum, that's a quote from Lord Kapila. Our various experiences occur simultaneously, which indicates a subtle coordinator. So you can see existence of many beings, their multifarious simultaneous experiences, and the coordinating background behind them. That's the Purusha. That's you. Very hard to argue with something like that. Are you going to stand up and say, our experiences aren't coordinated? I don't remember who I am when I wake up? Everything is random? I mean, it's basically what you're trying to say to us, and we're saying, sorry, that doesn't make sense to us. The seers have realized that Purusha. Others of us have just heard of it. You know the saying, right? Shravana yapi buhubir yo na labhyaha shrinvato pi bahavo yam navidyuhu ascharyo gyata kushalo shalabdaha ascharyo gyata kushalo nushishtaha. Means some have heard of the great self within. Others, though they've heard of it, fail to comprehend it. So there are those who have heard of it, those who have never heard of it, those who have heard of it but fail to comprehend it, but then there's that cross-section of beings who heard of it, went after it, found it, and realized it. And now they are it. It's like the greatest game of cosmic tag ever invented. You see, you're it. And if you come to a guru and he touches you in that way, touches you so that you can become non-touchable, if you want to say it that way, you see, then all of a sudden, you know, you're it. You are that Brahman. I am that. And all beings are that too, you see. So non-duality is so subtle like that, and so beautiful. Yeah. If you're given to teach it like I have been, or to share it, might be a better way of saying it, then you hardly find anything in the whole realm of knowledge. What's even in the realm of higher spiritual teachings called Dharma, so engaging and so beautiful as non-duality, Advaita. And also, you feel totally unqualified to try and say anything about it. I'm relying heavily on my crutches here, you see. These will keep me with something to say about the unsayable. It's not only untouchable, it's unspeakable. See, might as well call it the unspeakable yoga. So these ideas come as you take it up, and you're sort of in a state of inspiration. You see, you feel like there must be a way to point to this. There must be indicators. And so these 6 are indicators. Let's look at the first one then. Creative dependence. Prakriti samavaya. That is, he says, compounded substances, called objects, exist to serve a sentient being, an eternal subject. So my teacher used to say that all the time from the podium, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj in Portland, Oregon. He was the last living monastic disciple of Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi, at one time. And he used to say that there are the objects, and then there's the eternal subject. You're not the objects. Don't attach to them. Realize yourself as the eternal subject. So that's the idea here. The creative dependence of Prakriti Samavaya. If you look out and you see the worlds of name and form and time and space, then you must know those are all insentient. They don't have any way of existing except in you. They have come out of you, if we just said. They've come out of Om, they've come out of the mind, the great mind, they've come out of the collective mind, and they've come out of the individual mind. Right on down to the 5 elements. That's why you can connect taste to water and smell to earth, because the elements are connected intrinsically to your senses. One has come out of the other in a trickle-down process. You know, that's called projection. See? Quintuplication process. 5 elements, 5 gross senses, 5 subtle senses, 5 tanmatras, subtle elements, 5-fold mind. The whole thing is quintuplication, quintuplication. It's like a throw of a dice. You know the 4 yugas, Satya, Dvapara, Treta, and Kali Yuga, the 4 yugas? They're named after the throw of a dice. They're a gambling game. Mm-hmm. It's very symbolic, really. See, it's like any time we come here, we throw the dice, in a sense. What body are we going to get? What parents? See, are we going to get the Dharmic teachings, or are we going to fail to seek them out? Are we going to get a good teacher, or are we going to fail miserably? Are we going to succeed? It's all like a throw of a dice. So they named the 4 ages, which are hundreds and thousands of years long, each of them, after the throw of a dice in a dice game. So that comes up in regard to this underlying substratum and this creative dependence on nature, you see. You must then look out and see the worlds of name and form and time and space as having come out of you. If you can't see that, then you have to at least admit that those things are there for you. You see. You know how Lord Buddha described the 5 elements. He called them your 5 desires. You had a desire to walk on solid earth, so you produced worlds in time and space. See? That has to do with Roma, doesn't it? catch a whiff, you automatically want to go to that solid place and find out where that aroma is coming from. See? Get a little thirsty, you want some water, you want something to drink. You see, go and find that river where that waterfall is thundering day and night. You see. So he calls the 5 elements your 5 desires. So he puts together, even sort of psychophysically, rather than just cosmologically. You add Samkhya to Buddhism, which Buddhism is very, like Vedanta, yoga was very, very influenced by Samkhya. This is Samkhya yoga we're talking about. Asparsha yoga, wouldn't have been as rich and full if Samkhya yoga hadn't have been there in the beginning. And you can see why when you see this very philosophical production. We're used to looking at Lord Kapila and seeing the 24 cosmic principles and trying to learn those. But now we look at Lord Kapila and we see, gee, he did some thought about the Purusha. You can't call him an atheist just because he was involved in cosmology. Look what else he did. He believed in the Purusha, in the Prakriti. See? The only problem was they were 2 separate realities. So that had to be healed later in philosophical terms. Can't be 2 realities or they'd contradict one another. It has to be one reality. So, Om Drisham Pratitam Pravilapayam San, San Matramanandaganam Vibhavayam. San Samahita San Bahir, outer, Antaram, inner, Va. Take the outer and the inner and put them together. If they seem like 2, render them into 1. Then meditate on that 1. Then pass your time contentedly and, importantly, be free. Because you always are free. But if you begin thinking that this outer display, Maya, samsara, nature, prakriti, is independent of its own, that it has a life of its own and has nothing to do with you, then you haven't made this creative dependence fact of your own, you see. All of this exists for you, and you made sure of it, that there were forests and rivers and oceans and worlds. You made sure of it. Could the worlds do that by themselves? Then, you're a materialist if you think so. But then how do you account for consciousness, and how do you account for the connections between the senses and the objects? How do you account for the fact that if there's nature, there has to be a seer, a cohesive substratum, a witness consciousness, and that's number 2. Sakshi Bhutam. Om Brahmanandam Paramasukudam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvaititam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvama Sadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimala Machalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. Beautiful, beautiful sloka that my teacher used to say at least once a day. That part of it called Sakshi Bhutam is you are the witness of all things. You are the witness consciousness. You are the spiritual entity, the Purusha, that's looking out on the Prakriti, and that Prakriti came out of you for your own creative dependence. It's dependent upon you. It's there to serve you. You're the master, and that's the bond slave. Hopefully you don't treat it like a bond slave, because when you start doing that, then you see what happens to the environment. When you lose your sensitivity, just because it's insentient doesn't mean you shouldn't treat it very carefully. See, it's you, isn't it? Don't you want to treat yourself carefully?
Yeah.
Air, earth, fire, water, and ether has come out of you, so you can't just say, oh, insentient, I don't need to worry about that. See, it doesn't have any feelings, doesn't have any life. I can do anything I want with it. There's a story, man sweeping in the ashram. Holy Mother is there, she's Sharda Devi. And the man, after he's finished sweeping just throws the broom away, you see. And Holy Mother goes and gets the broom and says, oh, no, no, my child. It may be dirty, but it cleans places. You must always use these articles and respect them. So she took it and she put it inside a closet and shut it, you see, and cleaned it and so forth and shut it away. So she taught him a lesson, that you don't just use the tools to irrigate your own land and then throw them away, Ramakrishna used to say. He saw people do that in the villages. You should save those tools for others who need to irrigate their land. So there's a lot of lessons there. that are just pretty much basic moral lessons, aren't they? You don't mistreat objects because they came out, they're your thoughts made manifest, and also because you should be generous and help others. So you should give these objects to others in the right time, in the right way, with the right mindset. All in the Sattva Guna, of course, as Krishna says in the Gita. So this idea of witness consciousness, he says, objects consist of 3 gunas, and cognizing them via knowledge implies a seer. It's a simplified way of saying, you see, objects are active, like birds, or objects are static, like solid earth or rocks. Some are restless, some are balanced, like a river or a mountain lake, you see, a river that's reached a pristine, quiet lake. So all of these gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are all there in everything. You see some inertia in them, you see some activity in them, and you see some balance in them. They're an admixture. And so, therefore, it's one way of saying these objects are saguna, they're with characteristics, they're with attributes. And so, you have the knowledge of that, so that implies that there's a seer looking on who has that knowledge. You can determine which one is to be used when, in the right or wrong way, you see. You have that discrimination. You have intelligence. We hope everyone can develop that viveka, that discrimination, and use it in all ways, in their meditation, viveka dhyan, and in their daily life, and in their scriptures, in their study of scriptures. Use that discrimination. So that's number 2. Now number 4 we did, so let's take number 3. There's also the third proof of Purusha is intelligent existence. Sat Buddhi. That's one of my favorites, because if you're talking to an atheist or a materialist or scientist, then that very intelligence by which these people have composed their own systems is what you want to bring out. If you're talking to somebody who is more spiritually astute, then you bring out the word consciousness. You can jump intelligence and just word out, guess what? There's something called awareness or consciousness. Let's think about that. But if not, you have to step down to the first modification of consciousness, as Vivekananda called it, and that's knowledge or intelligence. No denying that. And if you were to take the tact that these first 2 proofs of Purusha presented to you, you would start connecting the senses to the objects, and when you did, the elements and the senses together, you'd say, wow, that took intelligence. What a major system we're talking about out here, see. With just the external alone, doesn't it just smack of intelligence? Doesn't it smack of a mastermind? How can you call that random? You can call it random if you have no belief and no faith, and you just are walking around like a materialist. You're missing most of the picture. But if you connect consciousness to it, intelligence to it, and you can find intelligence in books, and you can find intelligence in architecture, and you can find intelligence in cities, and you can find intelligence everywhere, in your children, in your grandfather. How can you deny it? It's like intelligence isn't really of nature. How can you call it a product of nature? See? Because I don't see that intelligence in anything in nature. Cows, horses, they may possess a little instinct and maybe a sort of dwarfed intelligence of their own, but you never see it like it's in the developed human being. God walking around on 2 legs, Vivekananda called the human being. There you see very powerful intelligence that stretches way back inside of you to your ancestors and beyond to the gods and goddesses and on to the great rishis and seers. They possess huge amounts of that intelligence. They've mastered it. So, he says here, nature is non-intelligent. An intelligent agent must exist to experience its functionings. That's you. Me? That's me? That's you. You can do it. You are intelligent, you see. And nature isn't. So, Kapila made that observation. You can see there's the insentient nature of Prakriti, and then in the middle, the operative laws of karma and gunas are playing an effect. Even if you looked at nature as gunas, you'd see intelligence there. Or if you looked at the principle of karma, cause and effect, reap and sow, that kind of thing, then you're going to have to somehow all of a sudden say, who's the law of karma? You know, who's your daddy? See, who is causing these beings to go through their karmas? Or who's overseeing it? Or who's the Phala Harini Devi here? Phala Harini Devi, Phala, fruit, Harini, holder, you see, observer of the giver or dispenser of all karmas. How does that work? That works through intelligence. How people get what they deserve. You see, is that just random? So this presence of intelligence is a very profound proof of Purusha, proof of your witness consciousness, proof of your master, being master of nature, proof of there being a cohesive substratum underneath you, beneath you, underlying. And number 5, also this inherent freedom. Everyone seeks freedom. Freedom might as well be God in India. You see, moksha, mukti, kaivalya, those kinds of words are there. Many words for it. And they say all beings are seeking it, knowingly or unknowingly. Vivekananda would say things like, the thief really steals because he wants to be free. So even people who are, taking the Atman to be other than what it truly is, and have really distorted the idea of the soul, or the positive aspects of life. They've really distorted them. Even they are seeking freedom, only by the wrong method. Krishna says that in the Gita. So everywhere you see this urge for freedom. So Kapila says here, the desire for freedom from bondage implies a reality that is free by nature. How would we know? How would we know that there is such a freedom? How would we seek it? Why would we seek it if there wasn't already something that was free? See? So this is just common good sense. Philosophically speaking, spiritually speaking, it's common good sense. There you see bondage or limited existence, and the longing to be free next to it, and then that ever-free reality that's called the Purusha. See? The 5th coffin nail in the coffin of ignorance, you see. The coffin of disbelief or non-belief. The 6th one is called eternal stability, nitya avastana. He says, universal motion can be recognized only by that which is eternally stationary. So, you see, if there's a train here, and a train here, and a train in the middle, and your train is stopped, see, and these trains are moving at different speeds, you would only know those are moving if you were on a train that was stationary. Have you ever seen that happen? Maybe the trains are going at the same speed and it looks like neither are moving. You're driving down the freeway and all of a sudden you get this feeling, everyone's driving backwards faster. They're not going forward at all, passing each other. These are going faster backwards and passing them backwards, you see. So this idea of motion, however it suggests itself, has to be predicated on a substratum that's immovable, that's stationary. Like that kutastha nitya we just said. So this is called nitya avastana. Motion can only be recognized by that which is stationary. And guess what? That's your Purusha. If you want to put it in very simple terms, Vivekananda said, Purusha, the soul, picks up the books of nature and turns the pages, reads it, and then puts it down. That's the way Vivekananda would put it. And guess what? When it picked up the book of nature and read it and put it down, it wasn't moving. See? All those experiences in nature you had in the pages of the book of nature were had inside of you, and you didn't move to get them. You just drank them in, right? So you're that cohesive substratum. You're that eternally stable consciousness that's reading the experiences of nature as if in a book. And you go nowhere. Mm-hmm. If you believe you go nowhere, or if you believe you go somewhere rather, then it's called dreaming. Mass, collective, mental dreaming. So the soul never moves. Where's the place it will go when all space is in the soul? And where's the time it will go somewhere when all of time is in the soul? See? This is the grand Purusha, the indweller in the city of 9 gates. And he calls it Shuddha Buddha Mukta. Purusha is Shuddha, that means pure. Buddha, intelligent, Mukta, free. It is pure, ever aware, and ever free, says Lord Kapila of the Samkhya system, thousands of years prior to Christ. Samkhya Yoga. We salute Lord Kapila because he was the first person who did his homework. He outlined the Purusha and Prakriti for us really well. In Prakriti, he put it into 24 cosmic principles. In Purusha, he puts it in terms of 6 proofs, that you don't have to go very far. You have intelligence, so use it. You see, if intelligence is one of these important aspects, then you use it to ponder this a little bit. And by pondering it, then you become a candidate for non-touch yoga. See? It's just right around the corner. You can live in it. You see. Moment to moment, day to day, you can begin to live in it and be untouched. Now, I thought in the remaining time in the first half, we'd look back on one of the charts which many of you have not seen, but it's from our Zen Buddhist retreat two retreats that we gave. We gave one here in Hawaii recently, and we gave one in Portland, Oregon. And I came up with a good 6-8 charts on Zen Buddhism. And this was one of them, and it very much shows the non-touch yoga the way the Zen Buddhists. Zen Buddhism also has its way of explaining this non-touch idea, this completely transcendent idea, right here in the midst of everything. Like one of these entries says, Banpo no Joshiki, see, every man's consciousness. So they're talking about there being no separation between absolute reality and relativity. It's like if you're having tea, you're in Satori. Probably if you're having tea at home, you don't realize you're in Satori, but if you're having tea with a Roshi, probably you're feeling, well, this is very defined. This is very slow and gradual. This is very consciousness. I better pick up my cup very carefully. I better sip my tea very carefully. You see, the whole thing is just, the atmosphere has changed because you're in the atmosphere of a person who sees no difference between the superlative and the superficial. They become one. Didn't we just chant, take the external and internal and render them into one state? Well, that's what happens to you when you do. All of a sudden, you're not, seeing fairies in the air or something, see, or elves, or menahunis, see. All of that stuff goes away. It's every man's consciousness. It's just, I'm in my own consciousness right now. This is all pure and perfect. All the problems have gone away. I saw my teacher living like that for decades. Couldn't figure it out at first, when I first met him. It seemed too simple. Everything was easy to him. There were no choices. There were no burdens. Just always his mind was in that non-dual state. I mean, of course, he learned it from masters like Holy Mother and Swami Vivekananda. He even sang about it. Sharada Ramakrishna Bande Kechere Bai Sharada Ramakrishna Name Bande Kechere Bai Beshabu Ban Beshe Gelo Aha Boli Hari Jai Beshabu Ban Beshe Gelo Aha Boli Hari Jai Sharada Ramakrishna Name Bande Kechere Bai Sharada Ramakrishna Name Bande Kechere Bai. What is he saying? Precious brothers and sisters, can you hear that distant sound sweeping towards us? Like the approach of a great flood, the powerful names of Sharada and Ramakrishna are storming the boundaries of relative existence. This is what happens to you in meditation. So this great light comes upon you, all of this disappears, and you're washed like a great flood. You're put into samadhi. Like a surging ocean of ecstatic bliss, annihilating the imaginary boundaries between matter and spirit. Show me that line of demarcation where spirit stops and matter begins. I'd like to see that. See? So when you're in your practice phase, you discriminate between this and that. You cause a healthy distinction, a healthy separation. That's good for you because you don't have it together yet. But then you see the external and the internal. When you are able to do that, you start to bring them together and fuse them into one thing. And that's non-touch yoga. How does a man in that kind of yoga look? Uddhava asked Krishna. How does he speak? How does he walk? How does he talk? How does he eat? How does he lay? Like everyone else. There's no miracle there. But if you were to be in that state of consciousness, your whole life would be peace. Subtle bliss would be what you wake up to and what you go to sleep to. You would be in this state of subtle bliss, ananda. See? And they are. Do they have any problems? There may be huge problems in the world for a Dalai Lama, but does he change at all? Could lose his country, could have his friends killed. See? He's still the Dalai Lama, he's still devoted to Buddha, and he's still living in nirvana. It's the state of nirvana. Not walking on water or something. If he did that, he could have stopped the Red Chinese. If he used miracles or powers. Those are beneath the realized souls. They want this non-touch yoga. They want this non-duality. They want this Advaita. Because that's the safety zone in relativity. Why? Because relativity has become reality, and reality has become relativity. There never were two states called higher and lower. There was just one all the time. And if I've fallen out of realization of that, I have to bring the two together. I have to struggle to bring these two together. That is, God is out there and God is in here too. That may be formed and this may be formless, but I can prove to myself through many, many systems that that's one reality there. Because you can't have two realities. They would contradict one another. It can only be one. So that's the meaning of that rather cliche word, oneness, you see. If you take it into Sanskrit, it's Advaita, and it isn't a cliche anymore. That's what you're after. That's what you're seeking. That's what you are. Funny, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the musk deer runs around looking for that beautiful scent on the wind. See? But it's coming out of its own navel. That's the confused or perplexed human being, running around everywhere looking for whatever it thinks that it wants. It's really God, it's really freedom that it's looking for, whether it's a thief or whether it's a seer or an aspiring seer. But nonetheless, you see, it's already that. You are the darling of your own worship. You are that which you've already been seeking, which you've always been seeking, see. There can be none other. Hasta Amalaka Stotram, the Nirvana Shatkam. I could sing you songs that just say that alone. That's the only theme. They don't deviate from it. They may borrow some analogy or some metaphor from somewhere, and work it into a beautiful hymn that's full of poetic words and very convincing, as the Upanishads say. But that's the one theme, and they don't deviate from it. So, do you hear that sound sweeping at us? Like a great flood. The names and forms of God are rolling over us, you see. Annihilating the boundaries between relativity and reality, between paramarthika and vyavaharika, as Gaudapada. Everything is unproduced. Certainly an unproduced thing is unproduced. You don't have to prove that to yourself. But a produced thing is unproduced too, because if you say, I'm going to produce something, where was it before you produced it? Wasn't it in an unproduced state? So doesn't that mean that by nature it is unproduced? You're bringing it into production, so you're making it look other than what its true nature is. Making it act other than what its true nature is. And that's people, folks. They're acting other than what their true nature is. Their true nature is still. Their true nature is non-dual. Their true nature is compassionate. Their true nature is godly, divine. And why are they pretending otherwise? Well, the realized soul doesn't want to pretend anymore. So, Sharada Ramakrishna Name Bhande Kechere. Chant the names of the Lord and watch all those dualities just melt away. And you yourself will be able to remove the line of demarcation between nature and spirit. So, that's what happens then, even in ordinary man's consciousness, when it gets transformed. Every man is that Atman, in other words. But some have realized it and some haven't. Some have awakened to it, some haven't. Look at some of these flowers and moons that Lord Buddha taught when he was alive, you see. The moons and flowers of Lord Buddha's enlightenment. He says, who shall gain victory over earth when Mara's sunken ground, over Yama's realm, and even over the realm of the gods? It is that wise one who will select and study the teachings of the Dharma like a discerning gardener seeks the choicest flowers. Another part of the Dhammapada, he says, like a fletcher fletches the shafts of an arrow, with that kind of concentration. The wise man discerns the true nature of reality. So if the arrow shaft is a little crooked, he'll sand it down until it's just perfectly straight. He's that discriminating. So a gardener will select the choicest flowers. The pujari certainly will, to offer on the altar, because God doesn't want to offer anything imperfect to God. So this is this gaining victory over Mara's sunken grounds, he says. That Mara, it might as well be the devil in Buddhism. And over Yama's realm, that's death. And over earth, dominion over earth, all those things come to the Buddha, to the living Buddha. Well, look at some of the moons inside there. Bushin, that's Zen Buddha's name for Atman, really. It's Buddha nature. And there you see the Buddha sitting, Nenge Misho, smiling and twirling a flower. So it's a great teaching when he does that, smiles and twirls a flower. And only his most astute devotees, actually only one of them, got the meaning of that. See, why he was smiling and twirling a flower when he was giving this teaching. So you see some of these moons and some of these flowers. See all the flowers that he's emanating in that image? One of them is called Inchinen Fusho, thoughts not arising. Thoughts not arising. Nice way of putting it. It's much better than saying, thoughts do not arise in my mind. Just thoughts not arising. It's the yoga of thoughts not arising. Do you have that? You have that ability? Just any time you want? I don't think I want to think right now. Turn it off. Like a switch. See? Hakushi. White paper, empty mind. Well, they're almost like Zen koans, aren't they? Just very, very short and sweet. White paper, empty mind. And they probably got that from India because Ramakrishna used to say, the white paper of my mind, if I hold it up to the light, I see little dark specks in it. So my mind seems really pure. I've done some work on it. I quit drinking coffee and quit smoking cigarettes and, gave up my bad habits and so forth. Now I think my mind is pure. But now hold it up to the light of Buddha nature and see how many little imperfections are still there that you have to work to get rid of. So, white paper, empty mind. You get that purified mind, you have that empty mind. Shoso funi, non-duality. So if you want a word for Advaita in Zen, there it is. Shoso funi. But don't forget moku funi. That is silent non-two. The silent non-two. There's a teaching about that in Advaita too. You don't, but it's right in Gaudapada's own non-touch yoga. He says, do not refer to reality as one. You must say not two. Because if you refer to reality as one, you limit it. So you just say not two. So there it is in Zen Buddhism again. The silent not two. So there are some traditions that won't speak a word about the formless reality. And Zen is very sparse on its words for non-dual reality. Jakujo, complete inner peace. Dai Anjin, great peace of mind. So peace of mind, or the great inner peace, that great stillness inside, is huge in Zen. Inshin Denshin, transmitting mind through mind. That's from guru to disciple. The mind of the Roshi, the mind of the Buddhist luminary, transmits mind to mind, one-on-one. Vivekananda said that's how you get spirituality from another soul, through that transmission. Another flower, Fugyo Nigyo, doing by not doing. It's karma yoga, isn't it? Of the highest kind. It's, and this is in both Zen and Advaita Vedanta, it's the bird flying through the sky without leaving a trace. It's that superb martial artist who can walk across rice paper without leaving a wrinkle. Almost floating across it, you see. Not leaving a trace, so that's what they mean there. Doing by not doing. So, action in inaction, if you want to take it back thousands of years to Lord Krishna in the Gita. And those beings who know action and inaction in action, they truly know. Or knowing that all acts are spontaneously arising and falling all the time. That's non-touch. Because one of the hardest things about touching is the reaction to touch. So, and as the actions you do karmic have a reaction that come back to them. You might have noticed. Or work in the kitchen for an hour and see if you can do it in perfection, without dropping a knife or cutting yourself or bumping into some open shelf. You see, all the little things that can happen, action, reaction, you see. So that kind of idea is there. Person who is in that kind of non-touch yoga, in this kind of Zen Buddhist version of it, see, will be doing while not doing. Moshosheki, leaving no trace. That's like a bird flying through the sky. Leaving no trace. As one of the definitions for my teacher's name, Asheshananda, means the bliss of no residue. Ashesha, no residue. After death, see, after the body's dropped, nothing to call him back. Renounced the world. monk for 90 years, so basically just, it was over, you see. And he just wanted to live in that non-dual state all the time. If he comes back again, he'll just come back in that non-dual state. It'll be like he never came, because he never left. Ishi Injo, training by one master only. They sometimes call that too one taste bowl. So you have one bowl of miso soup or one bowl of rice, or just mix anything with it. You just that one taste is all you're after, and that can satisfy your hunger. If you don't have a lot of crazy desire for complex diets and foods and so forth, so that one taste bowl. So they say that's the same way about a teacher and a disciple. Train with one roshi, or one guru, or one swami, or one teacher. Don't mix it up, because you may have two enlightened teachers there, but they might contradict each other in certain areas of the teachings, and that'll confuse you. So you leave it very simple and plain. Enlightenment's hard enough to get without having to face those kinds of complications. Now, I was saying this morning here at the ashram that there was a story, in one particular story, of a Zen master who was training a student. And it became known to the Zen master that that student could not get satori under him. He had taught him everything, and he was just that close to having the highest definitive experience. So he sent him to another roshi. And as soon as he walked in the door, that roshi, first words that roshi spoke, he got his enlightenment. So all the work was done by this other roshi, but he couldn't get over that last little hump. You see, so sent him to another roshi. Of course, that's entirely different than mixing it up too early. You qualify yourself, and just one little bulwark, you see, and just knock that down, and light comes flooding in. So it's all about setting that up as a kind of preparation. Ways to do that are through meditative wisdom, like hanya, through deep moments of insight, pragya, and like the wisdom you get from enlightenment, bodhi. It's like the word Buddha itself is kind of an enlightened intelligence. No doubt there's a kind of mean intelligence, that's called cleverness. In some people you see a mean intelligence. In other people you see a very secular or worldly intelligence. In some priests and priestcraft you see a sort of religious intelligence. But this supreme intelligence that's from enlightenment, that is superlative, that's sublime, that's incomparable. And that is what gets transmitted mind to mind. You stay in that atmosphere long enough, like we did with our teacher and so forth, you go back and keep lighting your torch on that light, on that fire. That's the fire of yoga. And ignorance is making a swift retreat, even as you're doing your practices. So that's bodhi. The last two entries here, Jisho, Sojo, Shin, all-pervasive, pure mind. Very Advaitic there too. And then we already said every man's consciousness, Banpo no Joshiki. These are some of the flowers of Buddhist teachings that very much are indicative of and reminiscent of a non-touch yoga, like Gaudapada is teaching us. The final quote at the bottom is very telling. It's by Shakyamuni himself, Lord Buddha. He said, I have the treasure of the eye of true Dharma, the wonderful mind of Nirvana, the true form of no form, the mysterious gate of the Dharma within me. So that's where he was talking about that third eye. I have the Dharma eye within me. He's one of those beings that mentions the third eye, or the Agya Chakra and Kundalini. That's higher intelligence. When consciousness comes that deep and relates with such subtle centers as heart, throat, and third eye, then you begin to have that emanation of wisdom off of a soul. Some people would be tempted to call it an aura. See, oh, I see a light there. But what they're really seeing is a sort of physical manifestation of an inner light, an inner intelligence that's coming off that enlightened mind. So these are just really a few, very, very few of many, many Japanese expressions that I found in my own study of Zen Buddhism, and that I learned from Lexiksen, who is also very much into Zen Buddhism. Jikai, we call him in that tradition. His name is Jikai. So this ribi, that's a nice saying, ribi in Japanese, Zen Buddhist truth principles. Now I'm just wondering, in the few minutes left, probably not a good time to start into another chart, but I think we will take our break here about 5 or 10 minutes early and set up for the second half of the class, while the live streaming audience will be able to see these two charts close up and study them and write them down if they would like to, so they can contemplate these truths later. That is part of the contemplative wisdom that's so important, is meditating on these truths later on, so that they become a part of you, part of your own, because they are a part of your own consciousness, but you have to affirm that that's the case. You have to prove it to yourself, like you would prove your existence of a witness consciousness, or an underlying substratum, or coordinating intelligence, like you'd prove that to yourself, simply by thinking about it, and it ringing true to you. So, with that said then, let's take our break here, and thank you for your kind attentions. We'll come back in about 10 or 15 minutes. Om Tachnayo, Om Tachnayo Ravrinni Mahe, Gatong Yagyaya Gatong Enupataye, Daivi Swastarastu Naha, Swastir Manusebhyaha, Urdhvam Jigatu Bhesajam, Sangno Astu Dvipade Sangjatushpate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we make an offering into the Great Self. May we always delight in this offering. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be into the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.
Nothing exists but thee. From the life heavens, throughout the boundless universe, and even into the dark netherworlds, wherever our souls journey, we find only thee. For nothing whatsoever exists but thee. Matchless is your presence, O Lord. I have found nothing which compares to it. Contemplating it, this humble singer, Jafar, has become illumined, and this simple truth has dawned upon his understanding, that nothing exists but thee. Jogu Jahai So Tu Ihai Tuj Se Hamne Jogu Jahai So Tu Ihai Tuj Se Hamne